Hello, my name's Gregory Egan and I'm a registered social worker from Australia. And today I'm going to talk about the topic of grief and loss. And I'm going to give 10 tips for helping with grief and loss. So let's get into it. So, what is grief and loss? So, Beyond Blue Australia defines grief is a natural response to loss. It might be the loss of a loved one, relationship, pregnancy, job, or way of life, or lifestyle, or house. Loss, grief and loss can take many forms. And yes, commonly we think about it as around death and bereavement, but grief and loss can be caused by many things. So other experience of loss may be due to children leaving home, infertility, and separation from friends and family. The most significant loss, the more intense the grief is likely to be. So just say that loss is your partner in life. Chances are that grief is going to be quite intense. Grief is expressed in many ways, and it can affect every part of your life. Your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors, your beliefs, your physical health, your sense of self and identity, and your relationships with others. Grief can leave you feeling sad, angry, anxious, shocked, regretful, relieved, overwhelmed, isolated, irritable, or numb. So, what I'm saying here is that there's a range of emotions you may go through during a grief and loss process. So, in this presentation, I'm going to give 10 tips for healing from grief and loss in your life. And I'm going to say grief can be complex and can be caused by many events in life, as previously mentioned. And these are just some suggestions for helping you through this grief and loss process. The first tip: allow yourself to grieve the loss. Give yourself permission to experience the full range of emotions that come with grief and loss. Understand that it's normal to feel sadness, anger, guilt, confusion, relief, as well as a range of different emotions. Suppressing these emotions can hinder the healing process and stop yourself from moving forward. Grieve in your own way. Everyone grieves differently, and grief takes time. No one can tell you how to grieve, as this is your journey. Seek support. Reach out to friends, family members, or support groups, professionals, hotlines who can provide understanding and comfort during difficult times. Talking to others who have experience with similar loss, or professionals trained in grief counselling or general counsellors, religious leaders, can be helpful. Or in the sense of a loss of a relationship, and maybe generalized counsellor rather than grief counsellors. In the sense of loss of job, maybe people specialized in redundancy or specialized in career counseling may help you move forward in that process. But if you're struggling, please reach out, as there is supports out there, or people just wanting to support you. Example of my grief and loss. Me, I had my family, friends, and workmates supporting me during my divorce a few years ago, and the process that followed, and also professional counseling to support me in my own journey of healing from the trauma I'd experienced and the loss I'd experienced. But still, I have grief and loss I am working through, being isolated from my own child by my ex-wife. So grief and loss can be caused by many things, as I've previously mentioned. And mine was going through a divorce process, the loss of a lifestyle, the loss of my home, the loss of my finances, the loss of my child. And I'm still working through that. So there's no time frame on grief and loss either. Take care of yourself. Grief and loss can be physically and emotionally draining. And I'm referring to grief and loss. And I know in my PowerPoint presentations here, I keep referring to it as grief, but I'm going to talk about grief and loss together. And because it can be two different forms there, what I'm talking about here in regards to grief and loss. And as I mentioned before, grief could be the loss of someone. Loss can be many things. So make sure you're taking care of your basic needs, such as eating well, getting enough sleep, and engaging in regular exercise. Self-care activities like walking, practicing relaxation techniques, engaging in hobbies, going out with friends and family, connecting with people can also be beneficial. You want to get back to some sort of normality within your life. So taking care of yourself is important. And I always talk about self-care because self-care is essential. So look after yourself, regardless of the type of grief and loss you're going through. Look after yourself and make time for self-care. And also be patient with yourself. Healing takes time. And everyone grieves at their own pace. Avoid putting pressure on yourself just to get over it quickly. Allow yourself the space and time to heal and adjust to life without your loved one, or adjust to life in whatever form of loss you have suffered, such as loss of relationship, loss of job, loss of lifestyle, loss of health. It takes time to figure out a process for moving forward. So be patient with yourself. You may need to gather resources around you. You may need to get in touch with supports around you. You may need to get yourself into a more balanced emotional state before you can find a pathway forward. So don't try to rush things if you're going through an emotionally hard time. Things take time. And 5, express your feelings. So find healthy ways to express your emotions. Write in a journal, create art, engage in activities that allow you to express and process your grief and loss. Talking to a therapist, counselor can help provide a safe space for exploring your feelings, as can talking to close friends and family members. No one can tell you how to feel. This is your journey you are going through. But it does help to talk through your thoughts and emotions to help you find ways to move forward. As I mentioned before, grief and loss, bereavement counselling, career counselling to help you get a new job, relationship counselling to help you with that separation process, mediation. There's all forms of different types of counselling and supports out there. Financial counselling you may even need to get yourself back on track. Life coaching, it could take all sorts of forms that you use to get that support behind you. So express your thoughts, express your feelings to these various professionals so that they can help guide you through a pathway for moving forward. And for me, sometimes it was just journaling. I had a Word document out where I was just writing a bunch of thoughts down, a bunch of ideas down on how I was going to move forward with my life. When I was going through a process of grief and loss and accepting that the relationship was over, it was a bunch of journaling that I was doing for several years. And also seeking professional help through victims of crime so that I could help with that healing process that I went through. Maintain routines. As I mentioned before with self-care, self-care is looking after yourself, but they may also be some of your routines. Like in the past, you may have been going to the gym a lot. You may have been going out with friends every Friday night. You may have engaged in Saturday night sports events or something like that. Or you may have your just evening routine of going for a walk with the dog. So while it can be challenging to maintain a sense of routine in your daily life following grief and loss, having structure can provide stability and a sense of normal during a time of immense change. Because you want to get back to a new sense of normal in a way. Or you want to create a new sense of normal. Or just get back into moving forward in your life. So routines can help that. Because when you go through grief and loss, things could be chaos in your life. A whole bunch of things could be going on. So at least if you have some stable routines in your life, it can help you create some predictability, I guess, in your life. So as I said, these things could be work, hobbies, interests, spending time with family as friends, doing things that are fun, anything that helps maintain a sense of normality and increasing the mood. Like often in bereavement, people feel guilty about having fun, about smiling, about laughing. And what I say to people is that don't stop living. If it is bereavement that you've lost someone close to you, don't stop living. Because those people that loved you, those people that cared about you, those people that were a strong part of your life would want you to be happy. They would want you to be embracing life, enjoying life. They wouldn't want you to be in a constant state of not going out, not doing anything, being paralyzed by that grief. They would want you to be happy in life. Just remember that. Honor your loved one's memory. So finding meaningful ways to remember and honor your loved one, if it was grief and loss or bereavement. That's what I'm talking about here. This could include creating a memory box, planting a tree, participating in activities that were important to them. Celebrating their life could bring comfort and keep their memory alive. Like when they were alive, you may have both been talking about doing a particular trip together, like taking a trip to Bali together. It may have been something that you were planning for years, but unfortunately time got ahead of you. And unfortunately they didn't make it before you did that trip. So even in doing that trip, you could be honoring their memory, like taking that trip to Bali as part of that sort of healing process, where you might take a journal with you, you might write your thoughts down as you're doing it. You might go to all these places in honor of their memory, or achieving a particular goal that you said you would, for example. Sometimes how we do this can be influenced also by our cultural and spiritual practices, but this is a personal choice in how you do this when it comes to bereavement and grief and loss. And practicing self-compassion comes into that bereavement, grief and loss, but also just general loss. Be gentle and kind to yourself as you navigate through this grief and loss process. Recognize that you're doing the best you can, and it's okay to have good and bad days. Allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arise without judgment, because you're going to experience a range of emotions, especially if it's bereavement, loss of someone that was close to you, or even loss of identity. You think of it, if you had been a teacher all your life, for example, and then suddenly due to whatever circumstances, you're no longer able to teach anymore. That has been a major part of your professional identity and who you are. And then when you can no longer do that, there's a whole grief and loss process you go through going, who am I without that job? Just be kind to yourself, as we can struggle a lot through these various forms of grief and loss. And it may take us time to work through these range of emotions. And we may need to do a lot of various things before we can move forward, which may take time and be difficult, such as going through a will, going through estates, doing retraining, trying to find a new job, healing from a relationship breakdown and the trauma that may have occurred in it. There's a lot of things, building new skills, building new knowledge. There's a whole bunch of things that we may have to do, getting our finances in order, practical things as well that we may have to work on. So be kind to yourself during this process, as often you've got a lot on your plate when you are going through the various forms of grief and loss. And as I mentioned before, seek professional help if needed. If you find your grief and loss is overwhelming and lasts for an extended period or significantly interferes with your daily life and functioning, seeking professional help can help. A therapist or a counsellor can provide guidance and support tailored to your specific needs, depending on the nature of your grief and loss. So seek it out. It could be useful to you. I've seen people go through And yes, often we talk about bereavement, but because one of my skill sets is career counselling and life coaching, often I've seen people lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods, go through mass redundancies, and there's a enormous mix of emotions that go through their head. And part of that process is helping them work through those emotions, but also looking at practical things to actually move forward. And sometimes a counsellor who's looking at things externally can help you move forward and refocus your thoughts so they can break down some of those barriers and deal with the change that is to come. Embrace the healing journey. So understand that healing from grief and loss does not mean forgetting or moving on from your loved one or recovering from various forms of loss, as I previously mentioned, such as loss of job, loss of relationship, loss of identity, loss of health. It's about finding a way to live a fulfilling life that has meaning and value while still carrying their memory and heart in your heart, or getting relevant help and support to move forward through the loss you have gone through, such as life coaching, career coaching, financial counselling, whatever the actual need is that you actually you require in your life, I should say. So embrace the healing journey as a process of growth and transformation. Embrace change and find your path for moving forward. And it's not always going to be an easy journey. I'm going to tell you that. You're going to have your ups and your downs, and that's completely normal, regardless of whatever grief and loss you've gone through. You will go through some ups and downs. But don't be hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Embrace that healing journey. Keep journals. Do some brainstorming with Word documents like I did, trying to find my own pathway for moving forward. Go away on trips where you're alone, where you've got time for self-reflection. Whatever that journey looks like, go on a trip, as I mentioned before. Like that example I was giving where you and the person that you loved were planning on a trip to somewhere overseas. So you actually do that trip as a way of healing, but also honouring their memory. In conclusion, grief and loss has no set pattern. And yes, there's theories and models and all that, I know. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is one of them. And as mentioned, grief and loss is not always about losing someone. It can be a loss of many things like health, job, identity, house, lifestyle, breakdown in marriage, etc., as well as bereavement. And everyone experiences grief and loss differently due to such things as their upbringing, their religious and cultural beliefs, their own resilience, their own networks and support, as well as their own skills and knowledge. There's a lot of things that can impact, or even how close they were to the person that they actually lost. This can all impact on how they heal from that grief and loss. So, in concluding, please feel free to leave your comments below. Hit like and subscribe to see more psychological content or social content in my counselling vlogs that I'm putting out. And if you've got any comments about grief and loss or tips that could help others heal and others move forward, whether it is through bereavement, whether it is through loss of job, loss of identity, loss of health, etc., loss of relationship, then leave your comments below so that you may help other people in that journey and in that healing process moving forward. And thank you for listening.